So just in the interest of time, I know we have a couple other topics that we want to cover. So maybe next you could start taking a little bit, giving your perspective on the recruiting process, how that works, at various schools, whether you're a target or a non-target school for a particular company, and just some thoughts on that.
Sure. Those aren't my lips on that slide. I think they're Christine's.
No way.
So the consulting recruiting process can, the bottom line, I guess the headline here is that it really varies depending on the campus you're at and by consultancy. And it's going to depend on, you can kind of get a sense real quickly if you are a target school for these firms, or whether you are kind of a mid-tier target, or whether you're kind of not a target at all but sort of slightly on the radar or that kind of thing. I did some quick homework right before the call and saw, for example, that there were links for like Deloitte, Accenture, Booz, and one or two others on Claremont's website. And so, like, I would assume that that someone put those up there for a reason, and there may be more inroads to those firms, for example. And so they're going to run a different recruiting process than maybe a McKinsey would, or another firm that hasn't been listed or doesn't have an established relationship. So with that kind of context, I will say that the bullets you kind of see in front of you are kind of the general bullets, right? That various activities and types of interactions that can occur in different types of recruiting processes. They may or may not apply to you with your specific interest in the specific firms you're targeting. But I will say that, kind of to the first bullet's point, that it really can feel like an extended courting process, and the analogy is strikingly accurate. You're really going back and forth, kind of feeling each other out, but in indirect ways where you're, like, to the point earlier about not necessarily talking directly about your strengths or whatever. Sort of just like a very touchy-feely kind of thing until you start getting into the formal, like, application process and submitting cover letters and doing interviews and all that kind of stuff. So that's all about, again, this idea of networking, but it can occur in different circumstances. So info sessions, or having coffee chats with campus representatives. Some consultancies will do a set of mock case interviews, either with small groups or even one-on-one sometimes. And all of that is kind of this courting and this continually feeling out of each other. And it's important, again, to be prepared for each of those interactions. Some will have a buddy system. That's another point where you actually might get assigned a sort of a personal contact that will be your contact throughout the process. But let me hit on some of this idea that's real big and bold here about networking again. This is kind of one of those things where, and keep in mind also, if you're thinking about some of the boutique firms, they might not have as established recruiting processes as some of the big guys, and it really behooves you to take a lot more proactive stance, and instead of assuming they're going to kind of come your way, show your enthusiasm, show that you want to, every time you talk to someone, ask if there's someone else based on this conversation and your interest area that it makes sense to talk to, and that kind of thing. That kind of proactive disposition, I think, is important. And then all the stuff around, kind of the etiquette, right? Thank you notes. Just always showing a sense of gratitude, realizing they didn't have to necessarily meet with you, I think is a good thing. And then any opportunities, I don't list happy hours and everything else, but some of those opportunities, again, will come your way. Other times you have to set them up yourself. The smaller the firm, or the less targeted your campus is for the firm, the more you're going to have to network.
Excellent. That's very helpful. And then in terms of networking, do you have a sense of, do sometimes candidates get too pushy in terms of, reaching out to companies, or is it better to err on the side of being proactive on the networking side?
Yeah, that can be a tough balance. In fact, a lot of times when I'm going back and forth with clients, they're asking me those exact questions around, should I send this email? Is it too soon? I haven't heard from them for a few days. And it's hard to give a blanket answer to that. I guess my big piece of advice there is to, Well, two pieces, right? I think the gratitude is a huge piece there, and because the more thankful you are, the more willing people are to talk to you, and that kind of thing. And second is to kind of cast the net broadly, maybe more than you were thinking before. Particularly in sort of tougher economic times, I think hiring is on the uptrend for these firms in general. But it's one of these things where it may be to your benefit to start with quite a broad net. Target the big guys, but also target some of the smaller or more local boutique shops. With the idea, and having an open mind about it, there's a lot of benefits to being in a small place too, which we can talk about it. But bearing in mind that if your goal really is to get into one of the big, 4 or 5 eventually, that one route to that is actually working for, a year, 2 years, 3 years at a smaller place, or even doing industry first, and then trying to make that transition. So going back to the pushy question, though, that's tough. It depends on the person you're talking to and the individual interaction and that kind of thing. But if you do start getting the sense, these guys are busy, but if you start getting the sense that you're being ignored a little bit, I think you can take it as a point of advice that there are other roads into the firms. It's not just one person through this one person, one network point you have or whatever. These firms are huge, and there can be a lot of different points of entry, I guess, is another point to keep in mind. It's a tough balance. There's no easy answer.
Sadly, it sounds a lot like dating in real life.